On Sunday, a gunman entered Club Q in Colorado Springs, killing 5 people and injuring 18 others. Although the gunman was apprehended, the community and the nation are still reeling, trying to wrap our brains around how do we put an end to these senseless acts of violence. Experts and advocates weigh in, all coming up next.
Live from Los Angeles, this is the Special Report with Areva Martin.
Joining me to help us make sense of what happened in Colorado Springs, what the climate is in Colorado around gun control, and possibly help us understand the motive of this shooter who killed 5 individuals in Club Q on Sunday. My first guest is a member of the Colorado General Assembly. It's Representative Brianna Titone. She is also the chair of the legislative LGBTQ plus caucus. Good morning, and thank you so much, Representative Titone, for joining me.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
First, I just want to say my prayers, my thoughts go out to the victims, their families, the whole community of Colorado Springs. It's just hard. Every time we see one of these massacres, I just feel like we go through this playbook. You know, you can go to Twitter, you can go to Facebook, you can go to social media, you can turn on cable news, and there are always thoughts and prayers. But we just don't, as a country, come together and figure out how to stop these acts of violence. Tell us what's happening in Colorado Springs currently. You are a member of the LGBTQ caucus. You're the chair of that caucus. What are you all thinking in this moment?
Well, we're thinking a lot about the victims and the victims' families and all those who were impacted. And it's just sends ripples through the community. This is a community that's really struggled with a lot of right-wing ideas, and there's been a growing LGBT community there who's trying to just live their lives with all of these other ideas. And this is really impactful because this was a safe space that was invaded by someone with a gun with the intent of hurting people. And that's something that's going to be hard to recover from.
Yeah, Representative Titone, one thing that I thought was so beautiful in the midst of this tragedy was the gentleman that apprehended the shooter, who literally, they said, pulled him by this piece of armor that he was wearing and threw him to the ground, jumped on top of him, took his pistol, because the shooter had 2 weapons, this AK, assault weapon, and then a pistol, and started literally hitting the shooter in the head with the pistol. He was there with his wife and his daughter to see their friend perform in a drag show. So this wasn't just a bar where, was frequented by gay people. This was a place where everyone in this community felt safe to see some form of entertainment. So tell us about that, because I think that gets lost on people that just because something is quote unquote a gay bar doesn't mean only gay people go there. That this is a bar that was open to everybody.
Yeah, that's right. It's, it's a place where people just have fun. There's, drag performances, comedy acts, dancing. This is just a place where people have fun. And, it's, the LGBT community happens to be fun, and we like to enjoy ourselves and be free. And that freedom that we have of being ourselves really does bring out a lot of those fun moments. And a lot of people that are not LGBT do come and visit these places because they are fun and they're enjoyable. And we do have that freedom of being ourselves. And I think that that attracts a lot of people to participate. And that's, I really do appreciate Richard Fierro and the bravery that he had just trying to protect his family. And he has a lot of guilt that he wasn't able to do enough, but he is a hero. And as much as he doesn't want to, say that for himself, he is a hero.
Yeah, I saw him give a couple of interviews. Richard Fierro, he's an Army veteran. I think he left the Army as a major. So, I mean, he's been in several tours of duty. He's seen combat. He said something like, I signed up for the Army so I knew I was going into combat. The people that came to this nightclub, they didn't sign up for this. They could not have imagined that they would see the kind of, just slaughter that he saw while he was in the military. And you're right, he did say, 5 died. I mean, he felt responsible that he wasn't able to prevent more deaths. And you're right, Richard is a hero by every stretch of the imagination, by every definition. I think there was a second person involved too that was able to help him apprehend this shooter. Representative Titone, we're not hearing a lot about the motive from law enforcement on the ground. Can you tell us what you're hearing about why this club? Because I heard the owners say they couldn't find any record that he had ever spent money there, that he had used a credit card, or that he had ever visited this club before. Are you hearing anything about motive?
I think they're still looking into a lot of that. They're doing a deep investigation, looking into a lot of social media accounts and communications, just to find out, why this place, why that day, is just minutes before Trans Day of Remembrance. That's really impactful. And if it was a coincidence, that would be an amazing coincidence that it happened at that point, at that time, at that place. So we would definitely like to know the answers because they've already looked at this as a hate crime and have made those charges. And I think that was the right move. But we need to and understand what's happening so we can make sure we can do something about this to prevent it from happening next time.
I know it was this Trans Day of Remembrance, this uncanny coincidence, we'll call it that for now. We know that Club Q was having a drag queen performance that night. Do you think that, the notion, that the thought that there were going to be drag queens performing, we know that the trans community has been under intense, they've been the subject of intense hate and violence in this country just over the last year.
Well, I mean, the drag community has been under attack by a lot of people, including, Congress people and pundits and everyone on social media who wants to say things. Exactly. And it's no coincidence that when you say things like this and you throw verbal hand grenades around about different groups of people, that you're inciting those violent attacks and those violent ideas. And, when you throw verbal hand grenades and then offer thoughts and prayers, I don't have any place for that. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah, we had a tweet from Lauren Boebert. She's a congresswoman from Colorado who says, take your children to church, not drag bars. That's not helping. No. And in fact, there's groups that are encouraging trans and non-binary and other gay kids to get into drag. And it's an art form. It's an expression. It's a way for these kids to have this art form for themselves, this expression that really helps them become healthy people. This expression is important for their development to feel that they're welcome and understood as who they are. And, drag needs to be really looked at as an art form that it really is. It's over the top performance. It's fun. I know a lot of people who have been to drag shows for the first time and really just went there with this attitude like, I don't understand what this is. And then when they actually, participated and watched it, they said, this was a lot of fun and I really enjoy it. And I see that this is a performance. And it's a part of entertainment, and to attack people for this kind of entertainment is just absurd, and we can't tolerate this kind of attacks on this. And I know, Representative Titone, you said that you think this kind of violence is because of these repeated insults and the misinformation that is so popular online is being disseminated by people elected to office. How is it that we know Lauren Boebert was in the tightest election possible in Colorado, just this last midterm election? She won by about 550 votes, very close. I don't think anyone in the Democratic National Party thought that her opponent had a chance. Does this say to you that she's vulnerable, that maybe in 2 years, this woman who makes those kinds of inflammatory statements, maybe she's ousted. Maybe someone who has, a different sensibility about protecting people gets elected in Colorado?
Yeah, absolutely. She was elected after Trump had really, fueled these flames and gave people the permission to just say whatever they wanted about whoever they wanted, and making statements like that he could go down and murder somebody and just get away with it. And now all these people are coming out of the woodwork, spewing a lot of the same kind of rhetoric, and they feel emboldened to say a lot of these things too. And when people do that, it makes people who are unstable and have ideas of violence already, that they get permission to do these kinds of things. So with that margin that she won by, which was very, very small, in a district that got more conservative, that says to me that the people there are tired of this kind of stuff. They have abandoned the MAGA movement, and they are moving away from that January 6th mentality that the election was stolen, and they want to come back to a normalcy where we actually get things done and actually work together. And that's what I hear at the doors all the time. And that's what I think that next time around, she's going to be seeing a loss in her future, because people are not going to take this anymore.
Yeah, even beyond that tweet, I mean, we have this photo of her, I guess it was a Christmas card, with her, holding these rifles with children. And as a children's rights advocate, I'm just horrified by the notion that you would put your kids in a photo like that. So it's not just what this congressperson says, it's what she demonstrates. How harmful do you think that is? I mean, it just sends this message of, guns, give your kid a gun for Christmas.
It's glorifying the gun movement. And, when we have, especially in Colorado, so many historic events of gun violence in schools and grocery stores and theaters, and now in this club, people are afraid to go into these places now. And that is, this community has been terrorized. And it's because of this rampant gun culture. And, we understand the Second Amendment. We understand where it is, but we have groups that are fighting tooth and nail against it and suing us for the laws that we're trying to do common sense gun legislation. And we want to make sure that people have that right to have the gun if they need it for the purposes that they need it for, but also to make sure that the community is safe. And we can do that, and we can balance that. And we need to be thoughtful about how we do that so we don't get sued and take it to Supreme Court, which, with this conservative Supreme Court, anything can happen. And, as we've seen, gun rights have more rights than people and women do these days.
Yeah, that's sad to say. I know Lauren Boebert, she was attacked online by AOC, by Pete Buttigieg, by others who were saying, how dare you offer thoughts and prayers when we can look at this, your Twitter feed to see all this misinformation that you're spreading, and to see how horrible you've been in terms of attacking the LGBTQ community. Are people locally, are they calling her out? Like I said, I know AOC, Pete Buttigieg, some of these national figures, but what about local people in Colorado? Maybe people who voted for her in that district. Are you seeing this groundswell of activists coming forward saying this is not tolerable?
There have been a lot. And, I was actually early on saying the same exact thing as AOC did. And a lot of people have, commented on that and said, you're exactly right. And, the comments that I've gotten on my posts have been saying, yes, this is spot on, and we need to be saying this, and it's being elevated. And the people of Colorado realize that we don't want a loudmouth congressperson who's just, insulting people and spreading fear about things. We want someone who's going to deliver the goods. And maybe this election will prove to her that it's time to stop with this nonsense and actually roll up your sleeves and do the work that you were sent there to do. And the people of Colorado deserve someone who's going to do the work and not be just a loudmouth who wants attention.
Well, I'm glad to learn that the opponent that Boebert beat by only 550 votes has already filed. Clearly, the National Democratic Party will take notice this time around. Hopefully, he'll get the support financially and the ground support that he needs, because we can't solve these issues with that kind of, as you said, rhetoric and that kind of conduct by those who are elected to represent folks. Before I let you go, Representative Totone, I just want to ask you, we know that Colorado's already passed a red flag law. We know Colorado has a Democratic legislature, almost a supermajority Democratic governor. So you are in a position to get sensible gun law passed. Like, you got to be worried about constitutional challenges that make their way to the Supreme Court. But do you anticipate any additional legislation after this horrific massacre? I mean, you've already been a leader in some ways on this issue, but is there anything that your caucus or your legislative body is planning?
There's a lot of conversations about it, and this event has really brought a lot of things to light. There's a lot of questions that still need to be answered about this particular event, and why was this suspect, who was potentially under investigation for other very dangerous crimes, not put on a watch list, or they apparently, you don't get on a watch list if you're not convicted of something. So how can we do something better with the laws that we have? There's a lot of analysis that's going to be done, and we have the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which we started recently. So they're going to be doing their work and investigating and doing a data-driven approach to make sure that we get it right, and that we're not just being reactionary. We're actually doing the things that need to be done to address the real issues that we have. And we've done a lot of work so far, and we can do more, and we need to. And I'm sure that once we get the analysis done and the information we need, we'll be going after that.
Well, thank you so much for your advocacy. Thank you for your voice on this important issue. And thank you for the work that you're doing. Again, our hearts are just broken by this tragedy and this unthinkable tragedy right before the holiday season, which I'm sure makes it even extra difficult for those families and for the community. But we're going to be watching this story, and hopefully, as you said, there will be something positive that comes out of it that helps prevent another massacre like this from occurring in your town and in towns across this country.
Yeah, well, thank you. The community will get through it. We're resilient and we're strong, and we'll continue to fight for our rights.
Thank you again. My next guest is Eileen McCarron. She's the founder and president of Colorado Ceasefire, and she's been working on gun control legislation and gun violence since 2000. Good morning and welcome, Eileen.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, my heart, I just have to say this to everyone this morning, my heart just breaks when I think of the families, the victims' families and the victims themselves. And the whole town, what you guys have experienced is just it's so horrible. I wish I could say shocking, but we've seen this play itself out in so many other scenarios, and it doesn't get any easier. But I want to talk with you particularly, Eileen, because you've been working on one of the central issues in this shooting, which is that of gun violence and gun control legislation. And Colorado has a pretty, what some would say robust gun control legislation, including a red flag law. Tell us just briefly what that law says and does and how it may come into play in this case.
So the red flag law, actually, Colorado Ceasefire initiated that back in 2016 after we failed to get a bill in 2013 passed. And we went back to the drawing board and worked with the people at the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence and what else can we do? And We had a forum that year on it. Unfortunately, we didn't get a legislature that would enact it until 2019. And what the law does is it enables family members and law enforcement to go to court and seek a temporary removal of firearms and prohibition for purchase of firearms for a person who is demonstrating that they are a danger to themselves or others. In the Colorado Springs shooting, which has brought a lot of attention across the country and locally, the young man who was the suspect in this shooting had been involved in a bombing threat incident a year ago, where his mother claimed he was threatening her with a bomb and ammunition and firearms. There was a 4-hour standoff with the police or sheriff's office, and but eventually, apparently, from what we learned yesterday at the news conference, the charges were dropped.
Right.
But
And so how does that impact, how does the law deal with those situations where someone's in what appeared to be a pretty violent situation, a bomb threat, a standoff for 4 hours with police, but charges drop? Does that trigger the red flag provision of this law?
No, the red flag, the mother could have filed a red flag or an ERPO if she had known to do it, or the law enforcement, the sheriff's deputies acting at that moment could have chosen to file a red flag petition. They apparently did not. As far as we know, they did not. It is not criminal. It's a civil issue, and they didn't have to have criminal charges. And I should have had this open just a second. The law actually says the court, I was just typing this up for somebody a few moments ago. The law says that the court will consider evidence, and it has a list of things in the evidence that they can consider, and it said it includes, but doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be on that list. But the very first piece of evidence it gives is a recent act of credible threat of violence by the respondent against self or others, whether or not such violence or credible threat of violence involves a firearm. So there was plenty of opportunity there and evidence that they could have gone to court to have an ERPO issued, which would have seized any existing firearms he had for a temporary time.
For how long is that temporary time period, Eileen, under the red flag? Once a red flag petition is granted?
So there's two types. One is a temporary one that is obtained without the respondent present. That's called an ex parte hearing. And that's what has created most of the controversy with it, because the opponents who did not want it said due process, people didn't have a chance to defend themselves. Well, these same things are used in domestic violence and child abuse cases. It's where we as a society are trying to prevent violence against people. So that one is only for 14 days.
Okay.
But at the end of the 14 days, there will be another hearing where the respondent will be present to answer the questions that the court has. And in Colorado, and I think this is unique in the whole country, the state provides the respondent with an attorney at state expense. So we went overboard to address the issues of due process.
So in that case, if that second hearing, if the petition is granted, how long can the firearm be removed?
And that one, if granted, will be for 364 days.
Okay, so that's almost a year. Let me ask you this, Eileen. You just explained this is a civil procedure, very similar to going into civil court, getting a restraining order against an abusive spouse, very much like a domestic violence ex parte application. You don't have to have criminal charges. You don't have to have an adjudication that you've committed a crime. It's just that you have access to a firearm and there's belief that you could be dangerous. We're hearing a lot about this shooter having an assault weapon and a pistol. do we know yet how he gained access to those weapons and if it was through a legal process?
So I listened to the press conference yesterday, and the DA and others there were very evasive about all that. They did not want to talk about any of the weaponry or many other issues, claiming, and for a good reason, they said this is part of the investigation and we don't release information. But I did hear that one of the questioners said it was a ghost gun. Now, I don't know where that's come from, and I don't know anything about that. And we know ghost guns are becoming more of a problem in the country and in our state. Potentially a law that we'll be working on this spring with the legislature on going beyond the Biden administration ghost gun provisions. These ghost guns have no serial numbers. They don't go through background checks. They are sold online, and they're kits, sold online as kits.
So currently, there's no, like you said, you're going to look at legislation that may go beyond Biden in terms of ghost guns, but currently in the state of Colorado, what is required to purchase this type of assault weapon that was used in this massacre?
As far as we know, the suspected shooter had no criminal charges on him. So there's nothing that would have prevented his buying any weapon, including an assault weapon. We don't have an assault weapons ban in this state. There have been some that have been enacted in the last year just last spring in a number of counties, because last year we removed the preemption law that we had, that local communities could not pass stronger laws than the state. We removed that, we repealed that. And so now counties are starting to pass them, and a number have passed assault weapons bans, but they've been sued now by the Rocky Mountain gun owners. But as far as we know, this young man, there's nothing that would have kept him from buying a firearm since the DA dropped the charges. Or whatever, somewhere in the system, they dropped the charges on the bomb threat.
Yeah, we know that there's now information out, Eileen, about this shooter changing his name, legally changing his name, and that there may have been other incidents involving law enforcement under his original birth name. Has that, how does that come into play when you look at, again, these red flag laws? It seems like that would make it even more complicated to, flag someone, and possibly this would allow someone to evade the requirements that maybe would have prevented him from purchasing this assault weapon. So,
Ms. Martin, I'm sorry. I didn't know about these name changes. I haven't heard anything about that. So, but it would have made for a mess in doing the background checks, but it would not have made for any difficulty in obtaining the ERPO after this event of the bomb threat. And that wouldn't have made any difference. That was enough. That's enough that a judge should have, if a petition had been applied, I would think any judge would have issued an ERPO, because he certainly met the criteria.
Do you think the law enforcement agencies that were involved in that standoff, the bomb threat with his mom, do you think they dropped the ball? Do you think they should have filed that red flag petition given the experiences that they had with that shooter?
Well, let me go back a little bit that might help in understanding this. When the law was passed in 2019, a number of counties across the state, 39 of them, I think 38 at that point, and one had already done it. 39 counties established themselves as what they called Second Amendment sanctuary counties. And their statements were, we're not going to enforce these things that we believe are unconstitutional. Now, I don't really think that using a red flag or ERPO petition is enforcing the law. It's utilizing a tool. But El Paso County was one of those counties that had said it had declared it was a Second Amendment sanctuary. So, and the Sheriff's Association across the state of Colorado was opposed to the ERPO, although there were several sheriffs who were strongly for it and spoke for it. The association in general, and most of the sheriffs were opposed to the law. The DA.
The county where the encounter with the mom and the standoff is one of these quote unquote Second Amendment sanctuary counties. So
Correct.
It's not surprising to see that that county did not file this red flag petition, because they've already staked out this position that they believe the law is unconstitutional.
I think that's a reasonable reaction to that there's not an interest in utilizing a life-saving tool. Yeah. And we actually largely, most of the cases it's used to prevent suicide, but mass shootings and family violence and community violence are also issues that could be prevented by the use of a red flag.
And before I let you go, Eileen, let me just ask you this last question. Do you hope that that county, El Paso County, and those others will reconsider the position that they've taken on this red flag law in light of this mass shooting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just tragic that it was not employed here. And then the other thing, too, is part of the red flag law is that the respondent is provided with information about obtaining help for behavioral issues so that they can pursue addressing their behaviors, their angst. In this case, might have been this man who's just been filled with hate, that they can address it with counselors and people who can help them get out of the circle of hatred and violence that's just churning inside of them. The other thing, I wanted to point out one other thing is that across the state of Colorado, 33% of the ERPO petitions or red flag petitions that were filed in 2020 and 2021 were declined, 33%. But in El Paso County, it was 72%. In Denver, it's like 5%. So the curiosity we've had, and I've been trying to get people to go and get the CORAs, the record acts, to find out what is this about? Why is this happening? Is it the judges? Is it the community? Is it the people who are filing? Probably it's because most of them filed are by, I'm guessing, this is total guess, are filed by individuals who tend to have lower success when they go to court than law enforcement.
Yeah. It's unfortunate to hear that you have this law that could save lives. You have it being enforced in Denver, but not in some of these other smaller counties. Right. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Hopefully this will be a wake-up call to those other counties that this law can save lives if implemented. And there's nothing unconstitutional about it.
I actually will point out that El Paso County is not a small county. It is the largest population county in the state. It just passed over Denver a couple years ago. But most of them are small counties that have made themselves second.
Well, all the more reason, and El Paso County, you would hope, would be leading the way on this rather than shrinking and moving away from utilizing this really critical piece of legislation. Thank you so much, Eileen, for the work that you're doing. Again, prayers to the entire community. And we just continue to hope that this country will wake up and realize that this gun violence is preventable. We just have to have the courage to step up and do something about it. And obviously you and organizations like yours are doing just that. Again, thank you for joining me this morning.
And thank you for the opportunity.
My next guests are Ricardo Negron Almodorba. He's Orlando Pulse Club shooting survivor, and he is also with the local Florida campaign. Well, he's the local Florida campaign manager for All Is. Also joining me is Dr. Melissa Michelson. She's a dean and professor at Menlo College. She's the author of several books. Her latest book is LGBTQ Life in America. She's been studying LGBTQ politics for over a decade. Good morning, Ricardo, and good morning, Dr. Michelson. I want to start with you, Ricardo. You are a survivor of a nightclub shooting. You were at Pulse, the nightclub in Florida that suffered from something very similar to what happened at Club Q. What went through your mind when you first saw the reports of this massacre?
Good morning, Areva. It's, we keep seeing mass shooting after mass shooting, unfortunately, right? It's becoming, I want to use the word norm, but it appears to be becoming that. But this one in particular, just because it was another attack at an LGBTQ plus club, it hit differently, and it basically takes you to that time when here in Orlando, our LGBTQ community was also attacked. A senseless act of violence rooted in hate, which is what we just saw now in Colorado as well.
Help us understand, like, what are the people who were there? We saw the Army vet who, so courageous, brought the shooter down. He has already expressed so much just guilt because he wasn't able to save those 5 people, although we know he saved, so many others. So as someone who survived, what is it like to survive that kind of massacre, to be there, but to walk away from it, to know that other people, weren't so lucky?
So every experience, it's different. Survivor's guilt, it is something that goes through your mind, particularly, here at Pulse, when I was able to escape from the club physically unharmed, but then in the coming hours, learning of just how devastating the attack actually was, from something that appeared to be initially maybe even something happening outside the club, like a dispute, actually turned out to be such a deadly attack in the community. So it's everybody's process is different. I do want to say that it's also valid, right? However people may feel in this moment, and it's important to be able to create the support system so that people don't feel alone or left out, and that they're able to express what they're feeling and how they're feeling it. And unfortunately, we are seeing other voices who are using this senseless attack to promote even more hatred toward Mr. Fierro, who is obviously a hero. He saved lives. And now he's also becoming a target because he's an ally to the LGBTQ community, and he was there just enjoying a night out with his family.
Yeah. Dr. Michelson, help us understand where we are in this country, because right now it feels like the attacks against the LGBT community have intensified, but maybe it just feels that way because of social media and because of access to so much media. But has there been an actual increase in these types of attacks? I think you're muted, Dr. Michelson. Rashad, do you know why we're not able to hear her? We're going to have to come back as we try to fix
Might be the headphones.
Your technical issues. Maybe you could remove your headphones
now.
Yes.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. So we're asking, is this a real increase in attacks, or is it just because we have more access to media?
It can be really hard to know if it's an actual increase in attacks, because often attacks against members of the LGBTQ community go unreported. Often that's because they're not taken seriously by law enforcement, and often, especially transgender people, are misgendered or dehumanized by law enforcement. And so we actually don't know for sure whether attacks have been on the rise. That said, there has been an increase in reported attacks against members of the LGBTQ community, and especially the transgender community in recent years, in the last 5-7 years. And so it's troubling. It's, every attack is disturbing. The number of murders of transgender people every year is disturbing. And this is especially true against transgender people of color, transgender women of color. But yeah, we can't know for sure because we don't know how many of the attacks just aren't going reported because people live in communities where they don't think law enforcement will respect them.
What about the 300 or so plus bills that have been introduced around the country in state legislatures? Yeah, I think we're losing her audio. I'll ask you this question, Ricardo. How important or how significant do you think these 300 plus bills that we've seen introduced around the country that are targeting, the gay community, do you think they are playing a role in just fueling this?
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
If your elected officials are introducing bills that say transgender people are not worth respecting, that they're less than human, that they shouldn't be allowed to play in sports, that they shouldn't be allowed to be in public, that they are dangerous predators, then of course that's going to increase hate. And so I think the real root of the problem and the reason that we're seeing these massive attacks in Orlando in 2016 and now in Colorado Springs is because people in these communities, they're hearing these messages endorsed by elected officials, endorsed by people that they respect, saying, you should do something. Drag performers are dangerous. LGBTQ people are predators. Transgender people, like these horrible, hateful messages. And people think, oh, I should do something, right? And so they think they're the heroes, right? Fierro is the real hero, but these people committing these atrocities, they have been brainwashed into thinking they're being heroes by protecting the community from these dangerous LGBTQ people.
And here in Florida,
lies at their feet.
Yeah, and here in Florida, those feelings were particularly exacerbated following this year's legislative session with the Don't Say LGBTQ bill, which really brought out a very nasty attitude towards LGBTQ community people all across the state and nationally, because it became a national talking point, and it just really incited violence and more violence. Even here, just a couple of weeks ago, the local LGBTQ center had to cancel a story time because they received threats from Nazis in Orlando in 2022.
Let me ask you this, Ricardo. When you look nationally at the polls, there's widespread acceptance of LGBTQ communities based on some polling. After that horrific shooting in Florida at the club that you were at, your governor, DeSantis, spoke up, said he was going to protect this community. And it seems like he did just the opposite, with the Don't Say Gay bill. How come a governor like that wins, not just wins, that your governor won with this huge margin over his opponent? What does that say about where voters in Florida are when it comes to protecting the LGBTQ community?
So without going into partisan politics, it was really, again, having that messaging out there about the dangers of, particularly the dangers of transgender individuals and drag queens, and how and using the word groomer as a word against LGBTQ people and categorizing us as predators, which is what was being done. And it was also done by people with power, people with a lot of reach, elected officials, people who work for the government, and they were using their reach to continue spreading these talking points. And unfortunately, we know what it leads to, right? We know the feeling of helplessness that it causes, particularly to individuals that are being targeted by this. My work here in Florida is about voting rights. We've held listening sessions with the transgender community and leaders of the transgender community, and there is a real fear of even being able to go and cast their vote, which is our right, to go and vote. And there's even that fear, which, all of these attacks are not just attacking the public life of LGBTQ people, but just every aspect of our own existence.
You're right. Okay, Dr. Michelson, we know the problem. What is the solution? How do we, as a country that says when they're polled that there's overwhelming, at least more, the majority of the country accepts and supports people living whatever lifestyle they choose to live. How do we get past this? How do we get to a place in this country where people can love who they want to love and, marry who they want to marry and identify, as they choose to identify?
Well, I think it's all about leadership from the top. So, for example, if we take a little time machine back to 2012, when Barack Obama said that he had evolved his position on same-sex marriage, many Black Americans who looked up to Barack Obama as somebody they take their cues from, they then switched their positions. And we saw this around the country, that as more and more elected officials, other people, celebrities that folks look up to said that they supported same-sex marriage, we saw members of the public change their opinions on same-sex marriage. And so if leaders start saying inclusive things about transgender people, supporting drag performers as artists, supporting transgender people as people who are simply living their truth and that they should be respected and that they should be allowed to exercise their full human rights, then the public will follow. So it's really about our elected leaders and our unelected, thought leaders,
right,
providing the leadership.
Do you see, Dr. Michelson, us getting to a point in this country where the issue of gay rights being separated from this, religion, because so many of the people that say they are quote unquote anti-gay or they don't believe in gay folks, and we saw Lauren Boebert say, rather than go to a drag show, go to church. How do we separate the two? Because that seems to be what the fallback position justification that people have. Oh my God, it's not me. This is what the Bible teaches me, or this is, what my faith teaches me. Do you see a point where we can separate the two? Because, you start arguing with people about their religion, it's just, you're going down a rabbit hole, and there's not much you can say to someone who really believes in some kind of literal interpretation of the Bible on those very selective pieces, right? Not everything in the Bible, but those little pieces that they choose to latch on to.
Well, what we're actually seeing, and again, this has to do with the same-sex marriage issue, is many religious denominations have shifted their position on that issue. And so, again, if there's leadership from the top, if the church that you belong to, the synagogue, the temple that you belong to, if the people there that you listen to are saying, let's love each other, let's be inclusive, enough with the hate, let these people be themselves, then that follows down. And we've seen many official denominations take votes and say, we support the LGBTQ community. We're going to welcome LGBTQ people into our congregations, into our communities. And so again, I mean, we're a very religious country. I don't think at all you're going to get people to veer away from their religion. But the answer is for religious leaders to more and more say, we love our LGBTQ community and we love everyone just as they are, and we should love them, not hate them.
And just finally to you, Ricardo, what do you want to say to people who have some distorted notion that people who are LGBTQ, are trans, are predators, are dangerous?
Well, first of all, and going back real quick to the situation about faith, being a person of faith and being an LGBTQ individual are not mutually exclusive. We have a lot of LGBTQ individuals who grew up wanting to be part of whatever faith that may be. The issue here is understanding then that one person's faith is not about the other person's faith, right? And finding that way to respect it without trying to force yourself above others. That being said, it's really unfortunate that people would immediately jump at the conclusion without any evidence that a drag performer or a trans individual is automatically someone that's a predator. It's really important to really get to know your community and to denounce all of these acts of violence. Like even if you're not an LGBTQ people, you should be appalled by what happened. You should be appalled by what happened in Colorado. You should be appalled by what happened at polls, and you should be appalled by what happened in every other incident of mass shootings that have been happening here. That's just human decency to feel pain for others. These are people that were loved by their family, by their friends, and it was a senseless act of hatred that happens because somehow we've allowed small groups of people who are very loud to go back to targeting what they feel is an easy target. So we have to, no matter our identity, our orientation, no matter like what we believe in, we have to come together and denounce all of these acts of senseless violence and hatred.
Yeah, Professor Michelson, you talk about our leadership. We know Herschel Walker, who's running for senator in the state of Georgia, has a new ad out about transgender athletes. He just got 49% of the vote in Georgia. What does that say about where we are, that as a country, we're still electing leaders? Boebert just won. Lauren Boebert, just won her election very narrowly, but still won by 550 votes in Colorado. So there is some huge portion of our population that's still voting for these leaders who are willing to spew this kind of anti-LGBT rhetoric.
Yeah, but people aren't choosing them based on their position on whether transgender athletes should be allowed to participate in school sports. They're voting for them based on their partisanship, based on their feelings about the economy and taxes and bigger issues. Attacks on the LGBTQ community and transgender rights in particular, that's a very niche issue. And for most people, that's not what's deciding their vote. It's too bad that it's not enough to make people say, well, I'm with you on taxes and the economy and jobs and blah, blah, blah. But your stance on transgender athletes, that's hateful. And so I'm not going to vote for you. Unfortunately, that's not how things work. It would be great if there was that much support for the LGBTQ community that was happening. But I think you can't say, well, people are voting for Lauren Boebert or voting for Herschel Walker because.
Well, I'm not saying they're voting for them for that, but they're not denouncing them, because you could vote against someone because they've taken a position that you find unacceptable, whether it's about Jewish people, whether it's about African Americans, whether it's about the LGBTQ community. And we do know that leaders suffer and pay a price for spewing hate against certain communities. So again, I think it's a legitimate question to ask, how come we don't see more people holding those people account? I may like you because of your position on taxes, but I cannot accept your position on transgender people because the shooting in Colorado is repugnant to me as, a voter, as a citizen of this country.
Yeah, I wish that more people took that position. And I think, unfortunately, there's just too much social acceptance in particular circles for transgender hate and for this, this irrational fear that transgender people or drag performers are going to, brainwash your children, are going to cultivate them for some kind of abuse, when really it's the transgender community that's attacked. It's drag performers whose lives are at risk. And there's no instance of anybody from the transgender community being the attacker. That's just a trope that we've picked up from the media. But given that there's so many people saying it's okay to hate transgender people, why would the mass public say it's not okay to hate transgender people? They're getting messages from folks that they respect saying this is okay, and it's all about protecting children, so it's okay to say these hateful things. And that's really the root of the problem.
where would you start, Professor Michelson, if you had a chance to sit down with one of these hate-filled elected officials who have this big platform and who are spewing this kind of hate? Where would you start? What would you say to them?
I think if you want to protect children, then you should be thinking about members of the LGBTQ community who are children. And if you're really concerned about safety, right, then you should be worried about the people who are actually the victims of attack. And I don't know how easy it is to get through to folks. You know, there's plenty of facts that would support my side. Usually the way to convince people is to find somebody that they are willing to listen to. So I actually don't think that they would listen to me. I think the key is, you know, for leaders of the party, for people that they respect, to be saying that. And so if there are leading Republicans who support protecting transgender people, they should be the messengers, and they have to get the word out to other Republicans or to other members of the public who are saying these things. But messaging, it's not really so much about facts. It's more about making a connection and being somebody who's going to be listened to. I don't think I'm the one that elected officials are going to listen to, but maybe other elected officials who agree with me would be more persuasive.
No, that's an excellent point. We're talking about trusted messengers, right? We know even with voting, it's not the slick ads from the elected officials or the candidates. It's that trusted messenger, a neighbor, a family member, a coworker that can move people. And I hope, as you said, there are more trusted messengers who are willing to stand up for the rights of trans people, for members of the LGBTQ community, and for marginalized people in general. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. Thank you, Ricardo, for sharing your personal story. We'll be watching this story, obviously, and just hoping that some of those messages do break through so that we can end the senseless violence against the LGBTQ plus community.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank all of my guests this morning. Such a heavy topic going into the holidays. We are just 2 days away from Thanksgiving and, less than almost a month away from Christmas, Hanukkah, a time of the year where we come together as family and friends to celebrate each other, to acknowledge each other for our strengths and to lift each other up. And unfortunately, we're going into this Thanksgiving holiday, giving thanks for all the things that, we have all been blessed with, but also feeling so heavy, such heavy hearts for the victims and the families in Colorado Springs and so many people throughout our country that have lost their lives this year due to senseless gun violence. I just feel like we know as a country how to solve some of these problems. Other countries, civilized societies like the U.S. don't have these mass shootings. They have violence, they have crime, but they don't have these mass shootings where one person can walk into a nightclub and literally within seconds kill 5 people, 10 people, 20 people. And we just keep tolerating it. We keep offering thoughts and prayers. Even we saw with the Sandy Hook families, they were able to sue in a defamation suit related to the deaths of those children. And all of those are important steps, but none of them are the big giant step that we need to take to make our community safe. And if you're feeling like this doesn't impact your life because you're not a member of the LGBTQ community, you are dead wrong. An attack against that community is an attack against all of us. And everyone, no matter who you are, should have empathy and should be willing to use your voice to fight against the kind of hatred that we see against this community. I have a surrogate son who's a member of the LGBTQ community. I have an uncle. I have a niece. I have lots of relatives that are members of this community, some of my best friends, and I'm afraid for them. I'm afraid for them when they go out into nightclubs and bars and restaurants, because I know that they are targeted, not because of who they are and what they've done, but just because how they have chosen to express themselves in the world. And that's not right. No more than it's right for me as a Black woman to be targeted simply because of the color of my skin. And I just, I beat people up a lot on social media with my advocacy, but today I'm just asking with kindness and gentleness that we learn to be accepting of all people, because at the end of the day, and these are my words to live by, love is love. Be safe out there. Remember, we're all in this together, and have a wonderful, wonderful holiday.
Report.